Okay. Beginning with roll call. Let me go down the list here. Chair Kennedy.
Here.
Member Mike Fan.
Present.
Member Randy Goodman.
Here.
Member Anthony Teeters.
Here.
Arnold Urias has been excused. And I believe Luther Kraxberger is on his way, so he should be here shortly, but I think we can go ahead and begin. We do have a quorum.
Okay, moving on to the discussion and action items. Hopefully you've all reviewed the minutes from the January 30th meeting. I'd like to request a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, approved.
Passes 4-0. Okay. All right. So today's agenda, and excuse me, Amber is out today. She was sick last minute, so I'm filling in the slot. I believe we all kind of know what is going on regarding the agenda, but talking about workforce housing policy. But before we do that, we're looking at an appointment of a vice chair to the committee. And
I believe our vice chair nominee has just walked into the room.
all right, Mr. Luther Kraxberger is now part of the committee.
I'd like to nominate Luther as vice chair.
Aye, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And it passes 5-0. Madam Chair, we do need to go back. There was 2 sets of minutes. I think the first approval was for the January 30th.
Thank
We
you.
also do a vote for the February 5th minutes as well.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, can we get a motion for the February 5th minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All right, passes 5-0. Oh, go ahead and vote. I'm sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, it passes 5-0. Okay. All right. Madam Chair, the next item
So
is the workforce housing policy draft.
So something, I think we're going to have a lot more robust conversation when we have our meeting with Flagstaff on Friday. So I still want to open it up, of course, if there are any things we want to talk through. And Randy, on a similar note, has spent some time with Flagstaff and can share some of the talking points he's uncovered from his recent meeting.
Well, I don't want to spoil Friday. I prepared a list of questions I have for the Flagstaff gals that Mike has. He's going to pass them out.
I'll go ahead and pass it
And-
right now.
And if you guys want to add anything to the questions, please feel free. But they've been at it a while, actually quite a while, and they're pretty well informed. And I was really impressed with the information I did extract from them, and I don't want to spoil it for Friday, so I won't say a whole lot about that. But I think that you'll find that the information we're going to get from them is extremely helpful, especially in areas where we had questions. We weren't quite sure which direction we wanted to go. They had absolute direction, and they put it in practice now for some time. So I encourage everybody to be here on Friday because I think it's going to be really informative.
And that is going to be a virtual meeting, right, Michael? They'll be Zooming in.
That's correct.
So can we request that that is recorded? Because I know some of our members are unable to make it.
Yeah.
You said it's a hybrid meeting, is that right? Virtual or in person?
It'll be in person for you guys, and then it's virtual for Flagstaff, so they can participate.
Well, thank you, Randy, for putting these together and taking that time. This is great. Does anyone want to talk through any of the policy language now, or do we want to wait until Friday?
This might be a pretty short meeting. Go ahead.
Well, did we get all the way through our policy? I know we got pretty deep into it, but I wasn't sure if we quite finished it.
Michael, do you have the page that we left off on?
I do not. I know we spoke a lot about the fees. That was something that we would discuss in further detail. We do have Community Development Director here, Chelsea Walton, that can speak to that.
Sure. Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commission or Committee, Workforce Housing Committee. Chelsea Walton, Community Development Director. So at the last meeting, you all asked about the fee structure and what that would actually impact for a workforce housing project. And so our team worked up a scenario that I'm going to pass out and kind of walk you through. And then I have some thoughts on how let me see this, and then one for Mike. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. And while Mike is passing those out, my thoughts on the fees in the policy may be to remove the actual fee type and the table that lists the types of fees that we have, and simply refer to them in more general terms. Our fee structure and fee names change at times, so it would be good to just mention them, that, depending on what the committee recommends to council and then council subsequently approves, just pick a percentage of waiver, or how you want to handle the fees, and then mention how they apply. In other words, we can mention in general, the zoning fees and the building fees and the review fees. So instead of trying to capture each of the fee types and then say 25% of this, 25% of that, just pick one percentage and then we can figure out how that applies. So again, recommendation is to just remove the table and replace it with verbiage. So you should have the scenarios in front of you, and I'm going to walk you through it. And let me give one to Connie real quick, because I have an extra. Okay, so we're looking at a larger parcel. This is a scenario based loosely on reality, but we were trying to think of a parcel that would be doable for a multifamily apartment project. So 6.08 acre parcel, currently in this fictitious example, the zoning would be single family 18, and the proposed zoning for a 192 unit apartment project would be multifamily high density. So in that zoning change, we're proposing and theorizing that we would potentially need a general plan amendment, which is a cost. So we're trying to throw as many fees at this as we can to give you an idea. So it would require a rezone, it would require a general plan amendment, and then we theorize that maybe 8 buildings at 24 units per building with a valuation of about $3 million. That's used for calculating permit fees. So with that, the total valuation for the project for permit fees, what we base our fee structure on, would be $25 million and change. So the total cost to rezone the project and amend the general plan is only a fee of about $3,500. And reducing that cost by 25% would save the applicant $865. So not a huge benefit there on that fee. Permit fees, based on the building valuation listed, are about $275,000, and reducing them by 25% would save the applicant close to $69,000. So a bigger impact there. Development impact fees on this project would be to the tune of $1.2 million, and the cost of construction at the current market rate at about 300 per square foot is $46 million. So you can see that the development impact fees are really typically what cost a project. But the bottom line in this example was, if we were to waive all of the zoning and permit fees, excluding the development impact fees, which we can't waive, and we'll get into that in a moment. But even if we were to waive all of the zoning and permit fees, that would be 0.6% of the project cost. Even though it would be close to $70,000, the the thing to weigh is, would that make a dent in the project for the benefit? I mean, yes, it's $70,000, and that's a good chunk of change, but at 0.6% of this theoretical project, you wanted to have cost behind it. So that's hopefully giving you a little bit of a framework. So now, going back to the development impact fees, those are what cost projects the most money right now. And you heard from Public Works Director Gwen Rowich that those fees are statutorily regulated, so they cannot be simply waived or forgiven. Even if the city decides that we want to do something, it would mean the city council approving to pay itself back out of a different fund to offset those fees. So that's something for this committee to consider, and just giving you a ballpark number of what a project, obviously this is all fictitious, but giving you an idea of the impact of what the percentage of fees we should be looking at, and then dealing with development impact fees for a project. You know, we have other projects around town that have development agreements where the development impact fees are deferred until certificate of occupancy, when their construction loan might change to a different loan type. So that is an option that could be worked into the policy. And then the not waiving, but, working out an agreement on a case by case through a development agreement with the party, and project scope depending, figuring out, does council want for that particular project to partner in other ways, offsetting the development impact fees by perhaps providing infrastructure. So there's a lot of opportunity to work with fees in that way. But I hope this kind of gives the committee a good feel for, okay, what are the actual numbers? When we're throwing around percentages, what does that actually mean? So I've been talking a long time. Do you guys have any questions? Anything you want to discuss on this one?
I do.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about where that money's going to come from that we deducted from the development fee? Is that going to come out of the general fund, or how does that get made up?
Yeah, that would be up to council's discretion. There are protected funds in the city that cannot be used for other purposes, so it would likely be a general fund. I would leave that to finance to guide council to the right area, but I would say it would likely be the general fund because it's less, it's more, doesn't have as many focused areas of expenditure. So, and that's a hard sell. General fund has got really hit as of late in the state legislature with food tax and different taxes that are going away. So, but of course that would be up to council as to how they want to handle that, and maybe for the city's part, another way is, as I mentioned, partnering with development of the infrastructure. So maybe the developer pays the impact fees, but the city partners with them on the design or installation of infrastructure to the parcel in the amount of what the development fees are. So there's other ways to do that to benefit the project, but again, it's going to have to be in the policy that's being considered more general, and then based on what projects come forward, that those specifics will need to be outlined because each property is different. What they need varies, so it would have to be almost a case by case at that point.
Well, I'm wondering maybe Connie could answer what the feasibility would be to actually put a number in the general fund every year set aside for the workforce housing fees, and if we don't use it all up, we can move it over to the next year. If we need more, because there's some big project, you guys can vote on that. But actually putting a couple $100,000 aside for these fees and be part of the general fund.
Well, let's see. Maybe we'll call Joe Baines and see if he'll be willing to give up his recreation funding. Have you ever seen a pie of the funding where the general fund goes? And I'm going to speak a little bit in generalities here. Police and fire basically is around 74% in the low 70%. Then you have out of there the government costs, the recreation, public services, the finance department, the council department. So it's very tight, i.e., the reason we had to go for the 478.95% tax. We are tight, and this community has lived on that tight budget for many, many years. I often hear we have done more with less. Well, here we find ourselves now in a position, the highest inflation rate, the highest building cost, and now we have to address these issues. This is part of the problem with not planning for the future. So in terms of workforce housing, it's really going to be up to the council to decide where are they going to take that money out of that general fund pie, if you will, and it's going to be tough. Somebody's going to end up losing out of that. We'll just have to kind of figure it out. I think it's going to really depend upon the importance of the project. I really do. If the project is going to make a big impact on this workforce housing problem that we have here, that may rise to the top as a priority for the council. Nobody's going to argue with you that we don't need workforce housing, but you have to be real about where that money is going to come from. And as Chelsea had mentioned, that money is what we call earmarked in many of those departments, so it's not like we have a lot of extra funding sitting around. So then we have to be very creative. Where are we going to get that money? It's tough when you talk about impact fees in particular because that bill still has to be paid. It's going to have to be paid by the taxpayers. So are the taxpayers willing to give up, in this case, over $1 million on this potential project here or hypothetical project in order to solve that problem? I don't think the general public understands. We haven't done a lot of marketing in this committee yet. I know that it's definitely in the minds of business owners, the lack of workforce housing, our police, our fire, the hospital. But we're going to have to do a big marketing campaign in order to justify, I think, in the community to get them to support this issue, because they'll ultimately end up paying for it. So, yeah, I wonder if, Amber, if you could provide a budget pie to the group so they can look at where all this funding in the general fund is allocated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting this together, Chelsea. My biggest thing on this is the zoning change. I mean, I see it as the biggest hurdle in any of these projects. I think that's something we should ask flag staff if they address any zoning changes. The money is the money, and it's gonna take what it's gonna take. I think getting more units per acre is a huge hurdle.
Sure.
And I think that's part of the housing policy to give council some reason to approve a zoning upgrade like that. Because from 18 to multifamily high would be a stretch and a half.
Oh, sure. Yeah, the rezone itself.
Luther, to answer your question, they're out in front of it at Flagstaff, and I don't want to spoil Friday, but they're not waiting for it to come and then make a change. They're in front of it. They already have it designed and listed. So if you approach them with a project, the density changes that are available based on what you're trying to do is already in writing in their zoning program. So they're way out in front of it, which is awesome. But to go back to what I was saying, what concerns me is imagine I'm a developer and I go to the counter and I talk to George about a project, and it's, maybe we can do this and maybe we can do that. There's nothing solid because he doesn't have a budget number that he knows there's a couple $100,000 out of the general fund to help this development. Now, granted, if we did several in a year, it would run dry, the fund, I guess, till the following year. But the point is that he could say, yes, definitely we can do this because he knows he has a certain amount of money sitting in the general fund to pay back these fees. So that's my only concern, is that it's all speculative for the potential developer when he goes to the counter, because it's like kind of a case-by-case basis. So I can't really count on it.
Yeah, case-by-case basis, and something that would need council approval. So I know that early on, the committee had discussed having a fund, and I know a fund, like a general ledger account, was created to allow for the receipts of donations or however the committee was going to start collecting funds for that. But obviously, that is definitely something the council would need to approve. And then any monies that would come from the general fund, council would have to decide and weigh the importance and the benefit of what the project was being proposed. So I don't see council preemptively filling an account with lots of money for whatever projects come through the door. I think it needs to be case by case, and they need to have the opportunity to review the project scope, the placement, the benefit, et cetera. But I want to go back to what Luther mentioned, because that was another thing that the committee had asked us to weigh in on, was the density bonus, because that is something that, to Randy's point, would require a land development code change. So I think, again, mentioning it in the policy document the way we have it is good, as more of a general mention of, hey, density bonuses are available. And if this gets approved as is, then the implementation of that would look like a land development code change and to accommodate what the density bonus would look like. And as staff in the planning division, we were kicking around the idea of perhaps a sliding scale, for every 1 to 5 units of workforce housing provided, you get a certain percentage of density bonus overall, with obviously more density allocation for the more units the project overall is providing. And we could look at the other items such as setbacks, and I think there were a couple of other things that were mentioned, setback, maybe height. But those things would need to be codified within the land development code. So I think the way the policy has it right now is good, just mentioning that this is a potential. And if council is on board with that and adopting this policy, then we'll look at, okay, what sections, I think in reviewing the policy, the enforcement section as well, there would need to be many code changes to accommodate that. But I'd see that as kind of a implementation program once the policy is actually approved by council. But density bonus, and how that process works, there's opportunity for that, and working with developers when the project is a good one that we're ready to move forward with.
Chelsea, I have a question about the recent significant increase in impact fees.
IT feedback? Impact fees?
Yeah. So in light of that increase and what that's doing to the overall budget of any project, has there been a calculation to look back at what the average number of projects that come across the city every year and quantify, like, what does this increased impact fee mean to the city's bottom line?
So the impact fees were reviewed by an independent firm, and they were based on the needs that the community has. But from the private side, looking at that, no, I haven't done that research. We could definitely take a look at it and just give a ballpark. But with the infrastructure where it is, the decision that was brought forward from finance and from public works and from their consultant for the increase to the impact fees was to help with the aging infrastructure that the city has now. So impact fees are not so much laying the new improvements and the new utility lines. It's about maintaining what the city has already. So looking back to say, can we decrease those? I don't think is feasible for the community overall. We could study what the impact is and what the overall amounts maybe are to projects that have come forward. But I don't know if there's opportunity to lower those fees or I'm not quite sure what the intended outcome of that research would be if we're looking to I don't know, quantify what we could have partnered on, or give me a little framework as to what information you're wanting to see.
I guess I'm just wondering, and let's just make up numbers. Let's just say the increase in impact fees in this next fiscal year is going to result in $5 million more in impact fees than they previously had budgeted. It just seems so counterproductive to the work that we're doing that these impact fees have increased to the amount that they have. And so I'm wondering if there's some way to almost internally subsidize. We know that, well, I'm guessing most projects are going to continue on being market rate projects. It's a small number of people that are going to really be seeking these, public-private solutions to create workforce housing. And so what can we do from that perspective? If we're increasing revenue there, is there something we can do to offset the detriment that it's caused for this particular type of project?
On a quick side note, it's just your mic that's doing that, and they're working on it, but they don't know if they'll be able to figure it out during this meeting if you wanted to move to a different mic.
So those are excellent questions, and I think that is something that council will have to weigh. And with the policy as recommended by the committee, perhaps there should be more verbiage around what you're proposing for the development impact fee. If it is a simple subsidy, like, hey, we're going to pay a certain amount of the development impact fee to help with the project moving forward, because the impact is very, it's great. It's a big number, especially for the larger projects. So that is where the cost is. But as we said before, any kind of city participation is going to have to come out of the city budget. So it'll likely be a case-by-case basis and something that depends on the project that's coming forward.
Would it be an appropriate ask for the finance department, since they're clearly looking at this for their forecasting and budgeting, right, to give us some data on this so that we would know what might be reasonable to even ask for?
I will ask the finance director what that looks like. Now, I know I'll have a conversation with him and see if we can get some data around that, at least emailed to the committee to help answer that question. Okay, just making some notes.
I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, guys, but I don't want to quite move off this, what I brought up a minute ago. If I'm a developer, which I am, and I'm looking at a project in Prescott and some other city, okay? And this other city's clearly telling me that they're gonna deduct these fees from my permit costs. Clearly, not maybe because it's got to go to get approval of a council. I'm probably going to go there because as Connie knows, there's a lot of money I spend in the upfront to even figure out if I can build in your city, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't want to spend that money knowing that, well, it's got to go before council and maybe it'll get approved and maybe I'll get a reduction in these fees. That's why I advocated for a set amount set aside that the planning can draw from to give me those deductions and give me those guarantees the first day I walk into the building counter. So just something to think about. I really think that's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and the bottom line, we're talking about priorities. I mean, Connie's comment is, where are you going to where are you going to slice it out of the pie? If it's a priority to council, it needs to be funded. If it's not a priority, it won't get funded. So I think from this committee standpoint, it's bring our recommendations to council, and then they're going to do what they're going to do. I mean, the bottom line is, let's face it, we've increased sales tax, we've increased impact fees, we're taking property off of the city rolls that was otherwise income producing property, and we're just going the wrong direction in many, many ways. So it's if we're going to truly get serious about workforce housing, it's going to take money. That's all there is to it.
So, Randy, I've got about 4 points that you had spoken about I want to address. You have to, when you're looking at your bottom line of your project, you're setting everything aside and you're adding it all up, and you come to that bottom line and you're going to look to the city for the cash that you need. I honestly don't think that's going to happen at any point right now until we can try to build that up, budget for it, create a department for it, probably tax for it. But if you want to look to the city, just like when we had those city maps here, we can do in-kind donations. The biggest help you could have is to have the price of whatever that property is that the city, and I'm talking about city-owned property that's buildable. If you remember when we had those maps, I know Luther looked at a couple of plots that were there. I think one was 5 acres, one was something else. Those are the things the city could do. We could temporarily donate that to you to be paid back to the city taxpayers over a very long haul. That would help you a lot. The other thing that the city could do is we could withhold payment of all of those impact fees till the very end of your project when you theoretically have collected all your money and you've done the workforce housing as the builder has promised, and then we could give you back whatever percentage of those impact fees that we could do. I mean, there's in-kind donations that we can do to help you, because you're right. You load up a project in the front, you have all these costs before you even break ground. What if a lot of those costs went away temporarily until the project was done? That would be a big help. Just think about how much money you pay for money. So that's one thought you need to be able to look at. The other part about that is I think community development as a contribution to this effort could locate those properties, decide exactly, have everything ready for the developer that walks in. They can say, this is the zoning exception we're going to give you, this is the density exception we're going to give you, these are the setback exceptions that we're going to give you. And then we're going to expedite this if you use one of our approved plans. I mean, there are things that can be done realistically that's labor intensive, it's in-kind donation. Those are the things, I mean, think about what you go through when you hire somebody to find the property, then you walk the property, then you have to do your due diligence, and then you got to pay all those fees up front. If you could take away a lot of that time and a lot of those fees and delay them until you actually have the money at the end of the project, and hopefully that money can work for you so that if you make some income on the money that you've been saved, that interest can offset some of the cost of the project at the end. I mean, you know, and I know, when you're doing projects, you have to be very crafty, if you will, with your finances, because you want to keep that money for the development. The other thing is, I think it would also, Amber, could you provide every member of this committee with the Raftellus report about the impact fees? Because Nicole, if you could understand what's happened here since 2014 with just public services alone, police and fire, where zero money was collected in impact fees for police and fire, which is another reason we got so far behind. Chief Dura and Chief Bonney both came in. The first figure was $133 million behind, okay? Mark Woodfill made them go back to the drawing board. They brought it down to $110 million behind. Every single thing about what happened here in Prescott is detailed in that report from a company called Raftellus. And I think we paid a lot of money for that report. I think it was over $200,000. Very inclusive. I think you need to understand the impacts of not charging impact fees. Remember what an impact fee is. It's to mitigate the impacts of growth for the community. That's the taxpayer. So we need that money to come in. Otherwise, you and I, we're all going to have to foot the bill for a lot of that stuff. Infrastructure happens. The city, the municipality has to give you police and fire. There are things that are non-negotiable that we still have to pay for. So, I'm an advocate. Also, those tax breaks. And Randy, you know that there's money out there to be able to collect, and I've spoken about that in the past, about applying for some of that money. I know it's getting to be a smaller pot now, but we do need to act on that. Let's see. I think that was it. If that answers any of your questions. But, explore, if you're thinking about doing this, explore what the in-kind donations could be from the city. I think anything that is donated to you will have to be paid back, but we can negotiate terms on how it gets paid back and if there's going to be a profit. So long as that taxpayer dollar eventually gets back into the pot, there is a way to do that, and I think it would help any developer coming in if you didn't have to come up with those fees up front. Thank you.
No, I like
Mayor-
that a lot, Connie. I'm sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem, before you leave, just a quick question. In your estimation, because you've been, as you've said, on both sides of the equation, you've been in the building, you've been over here, what do you reasonably see to be, if we have a robust program, like that's if, right? That's if the council believes in it and really wants to invest in this. But if we do, what percentage of projects do you see coming through that are actually going to be for workforce housing compared to the entire pie chart of all the other projects?
What percentage of projects do I see coming through?
Yeah, or a number.
Well, Nicole, just all we have to do is look at the facts. Look at the facts for the last 10 years. We've been aware of this workforce housing problem with literally the smallest impact fees out of the whole state of Arizona. You know, I worked in Maricopa County. Nobody ever came to me and said, here, I'm going to tell you how to get out of paying those impact fees. You didn't get a choice. You had to pay them. They're there for a reason. We haven't had any workforce housing builders come up and step up and go, I'm going to do this in the last 10 years when the impact fees were at the minimum that they could be. So we have to figure, we've got to think outside of the box on this. I do think we do need to increase density. That's a way for them to make up the losses of those impact fees that are now being imposed. So they're going to have to, there's ways to do it. You're not going to be able to give everybody granite countertops. I mean, the interiors of every one of these units can sometimes cost the same amount as the actual structure, building it. So there's ways to do it. You know, vinyl flooring, not solid hardwood flooring. I mean, if somebody goes back that is a builder and understands every single component, and I counted it up one time when I was in school, 1,700 products go into building one single family home at a minimum. But there's ways, you know, again, I'm just giving you simple examples. Granite versus Formica, vinyl versus hardwood flooring. I mean, that's just, you know, a little tiny bit of an exaggeration there, but those are where the real costs come down. You've got to do a real cost accounting of these, you know, workforce housing units. Now, is that going to be satisfactory for a doctor coming out of medical school? Probably not. But, you know, it's a sliding scale. They're going to be able to have their first you know, starter home will be in a different market than, say, you know, a person that works in the restaurant serving food. So again, we've talked a lot about there's no one silver bullet. We're going to have to supply a wide range of different products for different people. So how do we get them here? We can't pay them to come here. You know, it's all about the money and how they're going to be able to do it. They want to make a profit, and I am not begrudging anybody to make a profit. You don't get into that business without making a profit. But it's got to be offset by philanthropy, tax breaks, all the other different things. So we're going to have to think creatively on that.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, by your logic, we didn't really have any workforce housing projects to speak of when impact fees were low. And now that it's more expensive and more cost prohibitive to create those, it seems to reason that we need very significant, deep incentives for this to even be something that people will pursue.
Right, unless you supplement your income. A developer wants to make money. You're going to have to figure out a way to supplement that income. Is going to the taxpayer in this community the way to do it? Sure. I mean, if the taxpayer understands the urgency and how it affects them personally, they may step up and go, yes. But Mike had a great idea. You know, we've got a lot of charities in this town. We've got a lot of philanthropy. And I understand some of you are organizing that. I think that's a great way to start. Is there ever anything for free? Probably not. Somehow somebody's going to have to get paid towards the end. And if the user, let's say it's a young fireman, wants to come in with the understanding that we're going to give you your down payment money, but we need to have that back in some form, so we'll spread it over 30 years. And that's just a hypothetical thing, but there's ways to creatively do this and not expect the Prescott taxpayer to foot the bill for everything. I think they're willing to contribute, and I do think the council will get behind a reasonable plan. I really do. But, you know, this is government here. Everything works slowly. We need to budget for that. If the council decides they want to set up a fund and fund it, then we're going to have to get that on a budget.
Kind of letting the cat out of the bag for Friday a little bit, but I think it's important. When I met with Flagstaff, I asked them the very same thing. How are you attracting so much workforce housing projects? Because they got a lot of them. And her answer was every project that comes before the city in the incipient stage, in the beginning, they ask them, hey, are you aware of our workforce? Are you aware of what we can do for you? By the way, here it is. This is what we can do. And they hand it to them. And in several cases, the people were like, oh, yeah, I didn't really think about it. They went back, looked at it, redesigned their project, and now they got a workforce project. So that's how they're doing it. Every project, they try to inject it in there. It's up to the developer or not.
Well, like you said, they're getting ahead of the game. And I think at one point we can be there. That's what this committee is all about. We just have to figure out the way we're going to go about doing it. And I think we need to hurry up and get it done. But we've got to find the way to do it without taxing the taxpayers, because I don't think they're going to go along with it. But there are ways. We're not reinventing the mousetrap, which is why we're having Flagstaff come down here. But I do also want them to make sure that they inform you of some of the problems they're facing, because it hasn't been all roses for them either. They are facing some of the problems, and I've heard about some of them. So I'm hoping that they'll let you all know that, so that we can avoid falling into that trap with this policy, by the way. Thank you.
Any more conversation about the policy?
If you're okay with that, I'd like to go through it a little bit on the edits from the last meeting. That way, by Friday, I can clean it all up and it has a lot less red in it. But I can do that pretty fast. So, oh, wait, maybe. IT. The mouse just has to be right at the right spot for the clicker to actually decide to work. Said that we might not get to do this. Never mind. Let me send him a message. Oh, there we go.
You got it.
And there we go. So no changes there, no changes there. Minimal changes there, that we actually found that we have a code that says that we do have a housing authority that was created back in 1990 something. I assume that was created because we needed it for CBDG. It's very basic, very simple. If you want to read it, it's in chapter 1 of the code. But I took that out just because we want to make sure that we're accurate. This was one part that you just wanted less redundant, so that's what it looks like now. It's just talk about workforce, who it talks to. So sweet and simple on that one. Similar here, removing redundancy. I think I did an updated version of that. So it has the new numbers and then must be employed full-time within Yavapai County. Any that had some minor tweaks, I didn't do update pages, but that one had just some takeouts of like the minimum of 25%, minimum period may be waived or adjusted as council deems appropriate. Updated version of that. So eligibility, nothing changed there. That last sentence, it was just requested to take it off and then to add on a case-by-case basis. Incentive fees, so not a lot of huge changes. So I did throw out something, which is this slide. I'd like a little bit of feedback on what your thoughts are. I know you talked about a sliding kind of scale based on units. So I don't know if this is kind of what you guys were envisioning. Again, we can save this part till Flagstaff comes on Friday too. But that'll be something that when I send the cleaned up version, I'll throw it in there just so you can review it before Friday too. So we'll get that to you. Took those out because, like you guys had said, they were confusing, didn't quite make sense. We're going to come up with something better. Just taking out the percentage. No changes, no changes. Will to May. And then I think there was one more will to May somewhere in here, but I think those are the main changes that we got through. So if anybody reviews them, sees any issues, let me know. But if nobody has any serious concerns with what's been adjusted, I'll clean it up and send out a cleaner version so that we can have it for Friday. You guys are making my job too easy today.
This looks good. Thank you.
I'll clean it up after this meeting and send it out this afternoon. Yeah. Right. All right, I'll have IT switch back to our other presentation, and then we will go over just staff updates on where we're at with our consultant and the housing needs assessment. And then I know there's a couple people who won't be here Friday, but I think we should still have a quorum, so we should be okay. Do you want to talk about the consultant?
Sure.
All right.
Just briefly before Michael gets started, I just wanted to suggest if any of you are not going to be here on Friday, perhaps you can get me or Amber your questions in advance if you have some that you want to go over.
Okay, so an update on our Arizona Department of Housing grant. Two parts of it, as you know. The first part is the housing needs assessment. And where we're at right now, the survey is still out. There's a community survey that Pollock and Company, our consultant, is doing. I believe it's through the end of this month. And we've marketed it through the city and continue to market it through the community. So hopefully we get some good input from that. The second part of that grant, which was to hire a consultant that would come up with a strategic plan, and then the implementation of that plan. The contract was finalized in our last council session, and that is with Pollock and Company as well. So probably within the next week or so, there's going to be a lot more conversations with the consultant on how that's going to look. But they came through with the best proposal, and that's kind of where we're at with the grant. Any questions on those two parts of our grant? Okay. And I believe Pollock and Company will be presenting to the council in May. Okay. A short overview on March 25th for council. So, all right. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
I think that, do you have any other update? We have no other updates.
I know it's not technically on the agenda, but I just want to ask if any of the committee members have any future agenda item requests at this time. Okay, meeting adjourned.
All right. Thank you.